Hello, welcome to the presentation, the MFILEs I Want to Believe, that was presented at Fuse EU Connect 2022 in Belfast. Today I'm going to talk through a scenario that we had on a couple of projects within Veramed recently, where we have to send code off a client system to a third party for data monitoring committees. We've done this on a couple of projects and there have been a number of lessons learned. So today I'm going to talk through the scenario and go on to it. Okay. So as said, I'm going to start by talking about the scenario that we had before going into MFILE, which is the option that we used and the method we did for this problem, this scenario. And then I'm going to talk about the benefits and the risks of this method before going on to those lessons learned that I've already mentioned. So firstly, we have a data monitoring committee workflow. This starts off with the client and the data monitoring committee. The client then brought us as Veramed alongside a third party in for these projects, and with Veramed being the blinded team and the third party being unblinded. So the main aim of this DMC was to get unblinded outputs created by the third party to the data monitoring committee. In order to do that, Veramed were asked to create the code base for those unblinded outputs alongside the blinded outputs as well. And so the final piece that is useful in this workflow is that there were in-house macros available to us on the client system. And we were asked to use those in-house macros if possible. So those in-house macros should feed into the code base. This code base what we create, and then we'd send this across to the third party. But we were asked to not send those in-house macros and to ensure that the third party were not privy to any proprietary information from the client. That code base would then be used again to create the unblinded outputs before being sent to the IDMC. So in this scenario, I've already touched on one quite major problem that we found in that we couldn't send those in-house macros. But above that, we also had the client and the third party working on different systems using different versions of SAS. And us as Veramed are also tasked with creating the final analyses for these projects and not just the DMC work. So there's a few problems here that we wanted to address. So in order to do this, we came up with a few solutions. The first, which we didn't really look into in too much detail, was to figure out a way of securely sending those in-house macros. Now, this wasn't applicable here. We didn't want to do this because it ran too much of a risk. But this could be applicable on other studies. The second option was that we could just match the third-party system and then avoid using any in-house macros. That way we would be able to accurately create those unblinded outputs on the third-party system and they would get sent to the DMC. The problem with this was, though, that we would then have to have two code bases, one for the DMC work, which used the third-party system, and one for the final analyses that would use the client system. And this could lead to challenges later down the line if, come the final analysis, we had a mismatch of values. So we wanted to avoid this method as well. So the third solution we came up with was MFILE. Now, I'm sure there are other solutions. I'm sure other projects have come up with a better way of doing this. This is the way that we chose. So what is MFILE? MFILE routes output produced by the mprint option to an external file. Essentially, MFILE converts a SAS program into a macro-free program. What it does is it takes the executable code from the SAS file and puts that into a new file. It's quite simple to implement. All you need to do is add the options MFILE and mprint to the top of your SAS program, along with an output file, so file name, mprint, and then the output file name that you would use. And whenever you run a SAS program, what it will then do is it'll take all of the code that SAS actually executes and puts it into a new file, which is quite handy. So how does the code change sort of work? So I've got a couple of examples here, which should hopefully show how the code would change. So the first one, we've got a simple do loop from 1 to 3, and we're just going to put the variables 1, 2, and 3. So this is how we would write it in normal SAS using macro. But once it's gone through this MFILE conversion, this is what would be present in the MFILE code. Just put var1, put var2, put var3, which is the code that you wanted to execute in the first place. And there's no issues there. This is exactly what you expect. However, in the second example, what we're going to do is we're going to start off by creating the treatment counts for each treatment arm from ADSL, and we're going to put them into macro variables, TN1 and TN2. We can then use these TN1 and TN2s to label treatment columns, which you might do in an output to get those big N counts for each treatment column. But when you put this through the MFILE conversion, those macro variables will get replaced by the values at the point of the conversion. So here, it might look something like this in your MFILE code, with treat col 1 equal to 110 and treat col 2, 104. Now, these values would be the values of the blinded side, because that's where the conversion would happen. And this poses a problem if you could end up with blinded values, blinded data values on the unblinded outputs, something you have to avoid. So before I go into a bit more about that problem, I'm going to talk about the conversion itself. So again, Veramed and the third party are involved in this. So we created that code base using those in-house macros and then put this through a conversion, which outputted a nice code base, which could be sent to the third party. And this conversion itself is actually quite straightforward and quite simple. All we had to do is create a script that ran through every SAS file in the database and added in that options M file and a file output name. Now we just named those file output names the current SAS file with _M file for convenience. We then ran all the programs to create that M file version before saving all of those M file version codes, zipping them up and packaging them together. Now, there are other parts of this conversion as well, like we created run all files, which is just a batch file that would have a SAS run statement for every single file in there, and same for QC. We also had to accommodate certain challenges like the treatment labels that I've just mentioned, of macro variables that could be substituted back in. We tried to make sure that they were. And there are other few things like encoding problems that we had to address during the conversion, but the main bulk of it is just a simple loop through every SAS file. So what are the benefits and the risks? I'm going to start with the benefits. The first one was that we're able to use those in-house macros, and we're able to use them securely, which is a big plus. It's what the client wanted, it's what we needed. Brilliant. We can use those in-house macros to create the code base, which means that we can create the code base for the DMC work and the file analysis. It'll be the same. And also we can send that code base to the third party without running the risk of sending those in-house macros. The next benefit is that it's repeatable across deliverables. This is also key. We've had, I think, 10 DMC deliveries across the time period that we've been running this conversion. So we've had to have this repeatable across deliveries. Now, the reason it's repeatable is because the only thing that you need is that input code base. If you change that, then you can just rerun the conversion. It's fine. That's your only input. That also means that it is repeatable across studies, which is again key because we do this on 2 studies. And the final thing here is that because it's easily repeatable, part of that is because of the script is very easily adaptable to new issues. We can just add on to the script just a little section to address a new issue we found, whether that's study specific or globally. With the MFILE conversion, we can address both times. Because the script is just a simple loop through each SAS file, it is very easy to update. The final benefits are that the process is managed internally. By this, I mean that we first of all run the conversion on the client system, which means that no in-house macros get taken off the client system, which is a massive benefit. But also, because we're packaging up ourselves and then we send the package, we can actually do tests on that package first. So we can take the current dummy randomization we've got and rerun it on a new system to make sure that there's no changes when you change system and you get the same output. We can also then change that dummy randomization going in and see if any errors crop up with a new dummy randomization in the outputs, which has again flagged certain issues and things that we might need to let the third party know could happen. So this is probably the biggest benefit. However, there are a number of risks. The first one is that the issues at the third-party end are unpredictable. What I mean by this is all of the normal QC comments you might have, that the numbers in the table mismatch, you've got the wrong big N count, your footnote's wrong, we're not going to see that. They're not going to be the issues we have. The issues are going to be much more bizarre. The first one we got was that the page numberings were wrong. Now, this was something I never thought to think about in the conversion, that we might have incorrect page numbers. But when we ran when the third party ran the outputs the first time, they noted that the page numbers had things like page 3 of 2. And this is because the page numbers were substituted in during the conversion to be what they were on the blinded outputs. It's quite simple to change. We just had to substitute back in those macro variables in the place of the page numbers. So it's quite simple and quite easy to fix. But it was a bit of a curveball at the start. We've also had a number of issues with encoding and different SAS options and things like that having different effects. And generally, the issues are not what we expect, and they take a bit of time and care to sort of address. But they are manageable. The second risk is what we send to the third party is effectively a black box. By this, I mean that we send them a package with a couple of run files, and all they have to do is click on those run files, run the production and run the QC, and output an entire package for them. So they don't actually have to do much code manipulation and much understanding of the programming and the processes. So it is a bit of a black box for them. To add to that, the MFILE code that we send them is actually really hard to edit and update. All those niceties we add for good programming practice get removed in the MFILE conversion. Indenting and comments, a lot of them get removed. The other thing is all the validation checks that are in those in-house macros get kept because they're all executable SAS code. So you end up with pages and pages and pages of the code which isn't doing a lot in your MFILE code because it's just validating things that have already been validated. So actually the code that they get is very hard to update and can be problematic at times for them. Now this then leads to a lot of back and forth between us as Veramed and the third party, because any issue that they see, we've then got to determine whether it can be fixed in that MFILE code or whether we need to fix it in the conversion or even prior to the conversion. And this leads to a lot of communication between the two parties to try and work out the best way to tackle these issues. And this communication is obviously via email and can be quite tiresome at times, and it does pose a risk because you've got lots of communication channels and things could get missed. So we have been doing this. I've already mentioned, I think we've done it 10 times. I think it could be more than that, but we've done it a number of times and we've therefore got a lot of lessons learned. The first one, I'm not sure you'll be surprised by this one based on the last thing I said, is that communication is key. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of unexpected issues that you've got to work out how best to solve. And this means clear communication is so important, of clear emails of what the issue is without unblinding us and showing how to then fix it. It's also key in, if you have a clearer issue, you can then figure out whether we as Veramed should fix it on the conversion or whether it is really easy for them to fix in that MFILE code. As part of the communication, what we now do is every time we send a package, we send any previous issues that they've been fixing on their side in as part of that issue, as part of that email, so that we've got it documented every time what they have been fixing, so they can continue to fix those things. The second lesson learned for us is to expect the unexpected. I really mean this. You could be given any issue, to be honest. There's nothing off the cards. It's a very bizarre process when you actually get to do it, and the issues that they see on the third party are really nothing you'd expect. We have not yet had the number of AEs mismatch in a table, for example. It's always been something a bit more niche, a missing bracket or a missing percent sign that is in the DD data but not in the output. Very bizarre things like that. So the final lesson learned is to proceed with care. If you're going to follow this process, it is very viable. It does work. We've used it multiple times and I can't stress how well it works. But that is because we've spent a lot of time and care on early runs of this. We've done multiple runs on different dummy randomizations and different systems to see what falls over and why, to try and combat that in the conversion. The more time you can put into it at the start and get those tests done, the easier it will be throughout, because you'll identify those issues which will just occur every single time, because there will be some that just continuously occur and you cannot fix without them doing on their end. And that's not a problem, but is just a bit of a bugbear. So yeah, proceed with care, because it will help you in the long run. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email is available there. And thank you for listening.